Welcome to the Domestic Draft
Man.
Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. Dan, I got an interesting beer here today. I'm excited to talk about it, but first I see you got one. Why don't you kick it off with what you're drinking?
Oh, same. I had this beer company. I did them a couple weeks back, but I was recently in that area checking out Barley and Sword, who we had on a few weeks ago, and they're kind of in that little brewery incubator. They're called Seek Beer Company. They're relatively new here in San Diego. They were established in 2022. Husband and wife from the South, roots in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Texas. Decided to move to San Diego and open up a brewery. Dave, who is a husband, has some background in brewing. He was able to be the first brewer for Whole Foods Market down there in Houston, Texas, and he worked in Urban South breweries as well. So they decided, why not seek your dreams, seek it out, and move to San Diego and create this venture. So that's where the name comes from. That's a little bit of background about the brewery. But the beer that I have is actually a collaboration with Lake Arrowhead Brewing Company as well. Lake Arrowhead is kind of just right outside Big Bear. We've been out there before. So it's a cool little area. They did this beer together. It's a coordinated reprise is the name of the beer. It's got a 4.2 on Untapped. And I'm finding out now that it's 8.5%. It is and I'm going to ask you if you know what this means. It's a DDH Hazy Dippa. Do you know what the DDH means?
I'm actually drinking one as well, and I had to look it up. But yeah, no, I know a DDH, double dry hopped. Yeah.
Yep, and double
Mm.
IPA. So it's got some tropical hoppy notes in there, lemon, orange, citrus, but then it's really kind of murky. If I were to pour this out in a glass, I don't have one right now, but it would definitely be opaque. It'd be very like yellowy, orangey, opaque color, and it's interesting, man. 8.5. It's pretty heavy to drink right now. We'll see how I'm feeling by the end of the show. What about you? What are you drinking?
Yeah, and 4.2 is a great score. So I have Humble Sea
Mm.
Brewing. They're based out of Santa Cruz, California. I don't know how far that is from you, Dan. I think it's up near San Francisco. But the beer I have here is called Dogs on Boats. It's 8%. It's a 4.07 on Untapped. It's a double dry hopped foggy double IPA. A lot going on there.
Getting after
Flavors,
it today.
peaches, papaya. It's very fruity, but this like unlike yours, it's a little bit more on the lighter side color wise. It's got some Citra Cryo hops, and they say there's a couple different hop variations from New Zealand in there, Raku and Tahiki. I don't know if I said those right, but
Sound
Humble
perfect.
Sea started as a fiercely underfunded collaboration between three childhood friends. I feel like we've heard this story before. In 2009, head brewer Nick Pavlina began homebrewing under the alias of Humble Sea, won several national homebrew medals, and then he pitched opening a brewery in late 2014 to co-founders Taylor West and Frank Scott Kruger. The difference with these guys is that they started on a one barrel brewing system at Nick's grand-in-law's farm before they had enough guts and money to open the brewery and tap room on the west side of Santa Cruz. They've been doing really well since. It's a really cool story. But the other great part about this, they've raised tens of thousands of dollars for local groups and nonprofits, thanks to the community of Santa Cruz, the Bay Area, and beyond. So it's a very local spot out there. Really happy I was able to get my hands on some out in Chicago, last one on the shelf. So I grabbed it. But I'm also really happy to have another homebrewer on to help talk some Cubs and some brewing. It's Evan Altman. He's the editor in chief at Cubs Insider. You can find him on Twitter at D Evan Altman or on their Real Cubs Insider Twitter. It's at Real Cubs Insider. Evan, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I was enjoy learning a little bit more about some of the breweries out there, and I do love the San Diego beer scene. The only time I've ever had, so this is my fun, like I feel like it's like SoCal cred a little bit, although Russian River's not SoCal. So, but that's the thing. I was eating at the Stone Brewery, like their World Cafe,
Yep.
and that's the only time in my life I've ever had Pliny. They actually had Pliny on tap at the time, Pliny the Elder,
Right.
and so I was drinking Stone because I was there, and the server was just like, "Hey, man, you ever had this?" Like, no. And then I got to have Pliny at Stone, which I thought was kind of a cool little deal. And then I've never had Pliny again because obviously you can't find it
Super
anywhere.
hard. Yeah. Yeah, no, San Diego's crazy. Tons of breweries everywhere. Stone, that World Cafe, was that the massive one in like the industrial park where it's kind of like you're in Jurassic Park for a brewery?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really
Um,
trippy scene, but that was a few years ago. Haven't been able to make it back, but loved it at the time. So
and I know they got bought out recently by Sapporo, so we'll see if that changes anything with them and the direction. But let's talk Cubs. Co-founder of Cubs Insider, and you're coming up on your 10-year anniversary. I'm curious, kind of, how did this venture start for you? What was the genesis of this, and where you're at now?
Yeah, so it's kind of a rambling story. I'll keep it to as much as of a nutshell as possible. But back, whenever that was, early 2010s, somewhere in there. So Yahoo used to have, I think it would have been about 2012 at the time. Yahoo had something called the Contributor Network. You could sign up through Yahoo. They were just basically, before they were aggregating content from other sources and just putting it out there, they were having just kind of amateurs. You could write for them. You had to submit a piece, and they'd approve you or not. And they did, and that came out of so at the time, right, social media culture has kind of advanced in some bad ways, but at the time, right, like I was reading some things out there from other contributors, and I found myself criticizing them, and I kind of had a hard look at myself and thought, well, this is really stupid. Like, why are you, rather than just presenting a problem, go do something about it? And so I said, I'm not going to write nasty comments about somebody. I'm going to do it myself. And so I did, and then they shut the network down shortly after that. And so I hooked up with a guy named Tom Loxis, and we were working under the Chicago Now banner, which at the time was owned by the Chicago Tribune. They had a blog network. We were doing that for a while, but you couldn't monetize it. There was really nothing to do with it other than a strict hobby. So we went out on our own. Eventually, he had some other things that kind of took precedence over it, so I sort of took over. In 2016 at the World Series, I met up with a gentleman by the name of John Felice, who's now my business partner in it. And we kind of took it, changed a few things around, and went a little bit bigger to the best of our abilities. And so here we are now, moderately successful to have been running it for as long as we have. And no, it's enabled me to do some fun things, like go to the World Series or go to London to see the Cubs play. So really, really wild to look back on it when we started the thing, and then to see where things have gone now with the team, with the blog, with everything else. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
That's really awesome. I love how it's grown, and I love the thought process of, I'm not just gonna argue about what you've
Right.
written. I'm gonna write something myself and, put out there what I think. Because I think, like you said, social media has evolved, and it's a lot of, I'm just gonna rag on what you've written rather than, putting out there your actual thoughts. So I think
Doing the
that's
hard
really
work.
important. Now I saw you have a beer there. Why don't you tell us
Yes.
what you're drinking? And then I also mentioned at the top that you're a home brewer. So I'm curious, do you have a favorite beer that you've brewed, or maybe one that you brew often?
Yeah, so this is so I have a subscription service called Tavor that I belong to, that they source beers from all over the place, generally that you can't get distributed, and certainly that I can't in the middle of Indiana. Which is frustrating because some of it's like I've gotten some stuff. I don't think I've gotten some Hot Butcher, maybe some Pipe Works even, but a couple of them that I can't get locally that are from Chicago, which is, I'm paying a premium for it, but it gets delivered. But this is from Cross Strain Brewing Company, which I think is in Nebraska. This is called Hot as Hellas. So it's a lager with jalapeno and habanero chili peppers.
Nice.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, definitely. It's only like 4.8, I think. I say only because I know you guys are drinking the
These are
DIPAs.
heavy. Yeah, these
I've
aren't
got
typical.
no, but I like, and this is part of it's because of the subscription and what shows up. I've got a bunch of TIPAs that are like staring at me from my beer fridge over here to the right. And so I think I had a 10.4% the other day. So I got to watch out with those, right? 10 or 11. And I'm like, we're keeping it, but it's really nice. Like, it's definitely, this has a definite spice note to it. But what I really like about it though, is it's not just the heat. Like, and I'm a fan of jalapeno peppers and habaneros and things, but it's got a really nice earthiness to it. So you get kind of you have the nice malty lager, a little sweetness there. You get the spice, and you get kind of that, again, that earthy flavor from the spice. So it's not overpowering, but it's great. Like, nice warm night to
Yeah.
kind of chill with that. And it'd be great to have with some Mexican food or something. I just had
Right.
pasta, so it's a little bit weird, but I put some pepper flakes on it, so it kind of balanced out.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Big fan of the traditional beers. We just had a brewery on not too long ago as well that they're just focusing on like German style, like a Helles, the traditional brewing. I want to go back really quick and then we'll get into like Cubs here and like what's going on at the trade deadline. But you were just saying like some of the awesome opportunities that you got to do because of Cubs Insider, which is, you know, attending the World Series and then more recently going over to London and seeing that series over there. I just want to like, what was the reception for the Cubs over there? From what I was hearing and like seeing on TV and hearing on the radio, it sounded amazing. There was like Cubs pub and a bunch of fans there. Was it well received or was that the media playing up?
Yeah, it was really cool. And actually, I want to circle back just real quick to say like of the beers that I've made, and I've had a couple that I thought worked out really well. I did one that was actually a a bourbon chocolate stout. So I fermented it normally, and then I added chocolate syrup and did another fermentation, and then I actually added in chipotle. I'd soaked several chipotles, dried chipotle peppers in Jim Beam, and then I slowly added the bourbon into it over time to make sure the spice content was right. There was that one, and I did a summer ale that was really good that I had actual lemon and lime and then lemongrass. But
Wow. That's
yeah, so
that's I feel like
That
that
sounds
takes some
good.
serious technique. That's
yeah,
some professional stuff. How long
I
have you been
got
doing this
lucky,
for?
right? No, I mean I was doing it for years. I've
Yeah.
slowed down a little bit just because the time commitment is so much on that. But I called it bathroom closet brewing when I started because at the time it was literally like I would put the fermenter in the kids, you know, it's like I'm brewing beer in my children's bathroom closet, but the one they shared at the time because it was
I
like the
do the
only
same
place.
thing right now. I swear
Yeah,
to God, when I brew a beer, I put it in my daughter's closet. So
there you
it's a
go. So
walk-in
it's
closet. It's a
yeah,
bigger closet, but it's,
yeah,
yeah,
but it's the only
it's not
place. Yeah,
weird.
I knew I could control. Like I knew it would never get direct sunlight in there. I could control the temp a little bit better now.
Mhm.
In our house now we have a basement, so it's easier to do that and effectively cellar it. But um, no, kind of back to the London thing. It was really cool because it was still enough of a novelty for them over there, right? And I think Saturday more so than the Sunday game on Saturday. Like, so I was in line for beer, and there's a woman with a British accent next to me wearing a Cubs hat. And I was like, "Hey, if you don't mind, how'd you become a Cubs fan?" And she was like, "Well, actually, it's just a work thing. There's 6 of us here, and they brought 3 Cubs hats and 3 Cardinals hats, and I grabbed this one."
That's funny.
But it had a really cool feel. There was a gentleman he and his son were kind of running around. This was well before the game, but we were in a little kind of bar. It was there's a big statue kind of a thing that's got a slide. It's like a tourist attraction. So we're in the little bar cafe next to that, and he was like, "Is there something going on at the stadium today?" Yeah, there's a baseball game, American. And he was like, "Oh, that's like cricket, right? Like it could last for days."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, it only feels that way sometimes." But it was
We're
just kind of
working
neat
on it.
though to explain it. And like I found myself the funniest thing to me, and this was just kind of in general, just because I think as Americans sometimes, and rightfully so, we kind of think of ourselves as like more boorish and kind of crass than maybe Europeans. Like if you've ever been to an F1 race that they've had over in the States, it's like, oh, it's worlds different from an IndyCar race or a NASCAR. But the opposite is true for European football, right? So those fans are I mean, just crazy rowdy. So I was like asking the cops and some of the other guys that are working. There's like, what are the crowds like for this relative? They're like, oh, this is nothing. They said
Mhm.
what's weird for them is that Cardinals fans and Cubs fans were seated together in the same section because that's
Yeah.
literally not allowed. Like when West Ham plays, there are actual stadium rules. Like if you are a visiting fan, you cannot sit in a West Ham section, and they let the visiting fans out 30 minutes before the home fans, so there's no fights on the way out or
The
anything. So
hooligans.
yeah, I mean, it is really like it is well earned. They lean into it, so it was just kind of funny to see that on the other side. But it is really like everybody there who was working it, who whether that be security, whether it was the concessions folks, they all just seem to be having a really cool time. And I think part of that, again, it is a novelty kind of a deal. It's new, it's different. So yeah, I was really surprised by it, and I thought they did a great job pulling it off.
It seems like they got to just keep doing it, right? Because the NFL, I feel like when they go over to London now, it's like a big deal. It seems like it's packed. It's like it's a big event. People know about it because they've been doing it for so long. So I hope that the MLB just sticks with it because I think it's gonna stick over there. Hopefully. So
Yeah, I mean, and you
uh,
have a lot of expats over there too. So there's a lot of people that
Right.
want to see it.
yeah,
But I mean, hey, if there's a reason, it's just It's like the bigger version of putting teams in Vegas. Like you're not doing it because you're worried about the home team. It's more about like who's coming from the visiting team
Yeah.
this time, right? Like the Raiders, like Raiders fans will travel, but it's more about who's playing against the Raiders. What can we do to book this? And similarly, there were so many people who were out there then who were able to, okay, hey, we're doing our trip to England, or we're doing a trip to Europe, and we're going to make a week out of it, or 2 weeks, or whatever. So to have that as an excuse, I think was really cool.
Yeah. Let's double back to the team now. I guess where we're at this moment. I think the last time we checked, they were losing to the Nationals again. Because that game's going on right now. They lost to them last night.
Powerhouse
Definitely,
Nationals.
definitely sellers at this trade deadline. I mean, I think 43 and 50, 8 games back of the Brewers, 8.5 games out of the wild card. There's really, I mean, you could talk yourself into them winning, the division or winning the wild card spot, but I don't. Is it likely? Probably not going to happen. I think we were supposed to be a little bit competitive this year. We had some big signings in the offseason, at least make a little bit of a run. But I think at this point, a lot of fans would probably say that we're sellers, and I think there's a couple big pieces that people have an eye on. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I still, for the longest time, and part of this is just my belief that the Cubs shouldn't be rebuilding for 3 years in a row. They shouldn't be sellers 3 years in a row.
Big market
Um,
team.
yeah, I mean they've got the resources, and clearly they spent money. I think it's a weird situation, right? They didn't go into it going all in enough to say we're guaranteed to win the division, right? Like we are expecting to win,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was we're hoping to win. Um, and as we've seen, last year the sell off, so to speak, was mostly relievers, right? They didn't end up moving Wilson Contreras. Part of that's because of Dusty Baker. They didn't end up moving Ian Happ, who they were trying to, because they didn't get the price they were asking. I think we'll see. I still believe we should see more of the same, right? Because at the end of the day, you can't just go through and jettison these players time after time after time. It doesn't look real good for free agents coming in, right? And it just makes it tough because you've got to replace those guys one way or the other. So I think if they'll make some moves, certainly. I think we could see them maybe roll some guys like Julian Merriweather or Michael Fulmer, relievers like we've seen a couple times where they bounce back a little bit, you get good value for them. You can roll them. The troublesome part comes with, say, Cody Bellinger, Marcus Stroman, guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're only talking about rentals for 2 months. They can't really keep going saying, hey, we're just going to get a couple of teenagers who, might be something in 4 or 5 years. That doesn't help. If you sell 3 years in a row, you have to compete next year. Like there's no choice at that point. They've put themselves in that position. I think it's going to be one of those deals where they're going to hold on if they can get a type of prospect or a couple who can legitimately help them in the very near future. I think they make a move for that. But, at this point,
So
it's
yeah,
tough.
yeah. Who's at fault? Because like Evan was alluding to, and like you're saying we can't keep doing this, can't kick the can down the road and get a couple teenagers and hopefully they pan out and sell off the players that we do have that are contributing. Who's at fault right now for this team being 43 and 50? I mean, we were supposed to be better than this. Is it David Ross? Is it Jed Hoyer with some of these signings? Like Seiya hasn't really been that good of a player since we've had him. He has been healthy. Dansby's hurt right now. Nico Horner's struggling. I think it was like Horner, Happ, and Seiya were batting like 190 in the month of July. What's going on with this team? Are the pieces not fitting together? They all say the clubhouse is great, chemistry's great. That could be a poison pill, in my opinion, where everyone gets along too well and no one's really pushing. It's too comfortable. So why are we here? Is it Ross? Is it Hoyer? Is it roster makeup? Is it obviously underperforming? But what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, there's a combination of several things, right? I think with anything, you've got to look to the top first. And I look at what Jed Hoyer said, and I believe it was maybe at the winter meetings last year where, he talked about the Rays, not as an example in terms of spending, but how they win without superstar players. Right. And that to me was a really telling statement. Because they did go out and spend some money on Dansby Swanson. They got some other guys in there, but they've been really reluctant. Excuse me. If you look at the deals they did, They extended Ian Happ, not a ton of money, but they we hear about this intelligent spending. We see that all the time. And, certainly we see it with teams like the Reds who are resurgent right now with a bunch of young guys and not spending a bunch of money. But by and large, and I know everybody wants to look at the Mets and things like that, but you can look at a team like the Braves. Look at what the Braves have done with extending a ton of their young players, with swinging some trades for young, controllable guys and then immediately extending them.
Yeah.
Right. So you look at what they've done, like their top, I don't know how many players that they've got locked up. Whereas Hoyer, it just, there's this reluctance. And I'm not saying they should have gone out and kept all the guys that they traded away. Right. We can look at that, and I don't want to get too far. Right. But hey, would they still be doing that if they were in Chicago? Who knows? Right. We could look at that all different ways, but there's a point at which you can be so conservative that you end up missing a lot of opportunities. And I do feel like Hoyer is so focused on trying to he talks about threading the needle, right? We've heard that several times. And I think he's trying so hard to thread that needle that while he's doing it, somebody else is just hooking up the sewing machine and fixing their stitches and moving on. And he's still sitting there with the needle. So I still put it on him, although Ross has to wear something. The team is 3-13 on Sundays, and that is not just a fluke, right? There's something wrong with that. When you continually fail in the last game of a series, to me, imperfect roster or no, something is happening to where they're not maximizing opportunities when they should be.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
I think
but you look at Ross.
They need an asshole in the locker room. They need a Lackey or a Lester in there.
And Ross was kind of more of that guy.
Ross
I mean, I know they liked him, but
yeah,
he was kind of that guy. Like, he would kick somebody's ass, like, chew him out or whatever when he was a player. And maybe he's doing some of that, but he's actually, I would say he probably hasn't. He's softened. We heard him say,
right.
So I mean, Nick Madrigal with the really dumb decision to bunt with 2 outs that he had, because he literally said after. I mean, Ross said he forgot how many outs there were. That's the kind of thing that, as a baseball player, I don't care if you're an adult, I don't care if you're a professional. That's the kind of thing that would have gotten you yanked out of a game. In most circles, you forget how many outs there were. But then Ross said afterwards that, well, I knew he already felt bad about it as it was. Is it any good for me to compound that? And he admitted that he's kind of changed. He had pulled Javi Baez. He had pulled Kyle Schwarber previously. So he's softened a little bit. Is that what this team needs? If there's not, like you said, if there's not that lieutenant on the field, who is being the a-hole, who's going after him, who's chewing somebody out, where's that coming from? Is the accountability there? I don't know, but something has to change.
Right.
So I think the two biggest guys, you kind of alluded to it already, is Cody Bellinger and Marcus Stroman. Those are the two biggest question marks about who's going to stay and who's going to go. And I don't think they're going to get through this trade deadline with both of those guys still on the roster. Maybe one of them sticks. But Stroman's been fantastic. Bellinger's been fantastic. I would say Bellinger is probably right in the center of his prime. This is like a good opportunity to lock somebody up that I think is he's a glove defender. He's hitting, I think, over 300, 302 at this point. He's having a hell of a year, and he's a former MVP. This is a guy you'd want to lock up. Am I wrong? But he's also probably the best left-handed bat on the market. And, you seemingly get back, I would think, a top 100 prospect for him. What do you do in this instance when you've identified a good talent and got him on a cheap deal, gave him an opportunity here? He showed you that he can play, and then he's still got it, and he's fixed some things. What do you think ultimately happens with those two guys? Because those are the biggest question marks in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit different, right? Because Stroman, and I wasn't even thinking about this because of the fact that he had sat out the 2020 season. He played under a qualifying offer with the Mets in 21, so he can't be tabbed with a qualifying offer again. And so with him, if they keep him, they literally would lose him for nothing if they don't extend him. He's into his 30s, a couple years now. That's the difficult part, right? Is he signed that 2-year deal with the option for next year, which he's certainly going to decline because he's made 25 the last couple of years. Next year's for 21. He's definitely going to roll that into something more than 1 year at 21, right? So he seems like the most likely to be moved, again, simply for the fact that they would lose him for nothing. Bellinger, on the other hand, I think they can kind of play chicken a little bit with opposing GMs because they can hold on. It's the same thing that happened with Contreras. They could hold on to him, give him a qualifying offer, at least get a compensatory pick, which, is that great? Is it a phenomenal return on the guy? No, but it does at least give them more leverage in trade conversations, right? Well, you need to give us this, or we're cool holding him. And part of me wonders about the mandate from ownership too, because at the end of the day, what we've got to think about is they're supposed to be rolling out a marquee direct to consumer streaming service this month, here at the end of July. Uh, how are you getting people to buy your streaming service? How are you getting people to show up if you're trading everybody again? Who do you have to put on this channel anymore? So I don't know, but I think of the two, it feels like Strowman is the most likely to go. And it's hard to say that he's the most replaceable because we look at how well he's pitched this year. But I think with the versatility that Bellinger brings, and between age or youth, whichever way you want to look at it, right, and future projection, Bellinger makes just so much more sense if you're going to throw some money at somebody.
So yeah, I want to continue on that kind of like thought process where you're making the decisions and have you put your GM hat on, your Jed Hoyer, and you even commented, right? He's trying to thread the needle while somebody else is actually sewing the whole entire quilt right now. If you're the GM, are you signing both these guys? Is there any other prospects you're looking at with teams that are finally competing, like the Orioles, the Diamondbacks, where they have a stacked farm system and they might want to go all in this year and see what they can do? Are there any other kind of people out there, players out there, where you, if you were the GM, would flip these guys for maybe an immediate prospect, immediate playing at this level type of player, or are you doling out the cash and signing these guys up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of bad with other teams' prospects. I find that, like, generally, if I were to answer it, I'd probably have to look up what did somebody smarter than me say, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I like that guy. Like I kind of know who the Cubs have in their system, and I know who there's not a lot of depth, right? I mean, they've got a few guys coming up. I mean, Matt Mervis could get another shot, right? And that, if he pans out, that helps their lefty power, helps them at first base. But third base is really kind of questionable right now. If they could get somebody in there, right, to hold that down. We know they got Pete Crow Armstrong coming up, so I know they're not too worried about that. But they've got to, middle infield's fine for the next few years. They've got to get a solution as quickly as possible to
no
either
power on the corner.
First, right? There's none, and you can't really, and like on any corner, right? Because Suzuki's not showing it, and Happ, thankfully, finally hit another home run on Monday night. But you can't win in Major League Baseball with no power at any of your four corner spots.
Yeah,
it's pretty bad. Well, and when your main power threat is Patrick Wisdom and he's batting $150 or whatever, that makes it difficult. But yeah, I mean, I think what they need to look at it though and find who can we get who's the most talented, who's the closest to being ready, because I do think they have, if you look at Cade Horton coming up as a pitcher, you look at Jordan Wicks coming up, right? They have some guys who can come up in that rotation and finally do what they never did under Theo Epstein. The whole goal that whole time, they're going to draft hitters, they're going to get the hitters up, and when those guys come due for either extensions or big arb raises,
pay off.
Then they've got pitchers coming up.
Yeah,
and they never ever got pitchers. Now they may finally have that, but then you got to go out and sign some hitters now, right? You got to go find hitters, which is the opposite of what they've done. And as you alluded to earlier, Jed Hoyer hasn't exactly done the best job when it comes to evaluating offensive talent. That has been different. And Carter Hawkins, right, the GM, is a pitching guru, so I think they've done really well on the pitching side. But I'd be going after some hitters. I'd be going to try to find some lefty power, which they just desperately lack. Their power in general is bad, but for the left side is brutal.
What about Kyle Hendricks? Is that somebody that a team would look at? A veteran presence that somebody could bring in. I don't know how much we can get for him. Yeah, maybe a cheap, a cheap deal. Somebody could bring him in, a little veteran rental. Or do you think Kyle Hendricks is more likely to stay with the team?
I feel like, again, that's another one where they might get a lottery ticket for him. The thing that scares me, well, it would scare anybody, right? I think if we look at the red flag just with the shoulder issues that he's had, a little bit concerning if he makes that next start, because the one thing he had been doing this year, he hadn't been striking anybody out, or fewer than usual, right? Swinging strike percentage. He was never a big strikeout guy, but he's way down. Mm-hmm. And the one thing he was doing, he wasn't giving up home runs. He was giving up hits, but no homers. But then his last couple outings, we're starting to see some correction there. And that worries me quite a bit, because you can get by with a dude who's giving up a bunch of ground balls. If you've got a great defense, oh, that's awesome. Like vintage Kyle Hendricks, great. Anybody would want him. But if now all of a sudden we're talking about a dude who's given up a lot of dingers, that becomes really difficult. So I could see them doing it if it's kind of like when they traded Greg Maddux back in the day. The first time they actually traded him, the first time they let him go, then they got him back, and then they traded him. Or when they flipped Ryan Dempster, where I think you've got a veteran who you say like, hey, we've got a team. Maybe it's a California team, right? That's where he's from. You can go back home for a little while, and we'll kind of help you pick where you want to go. And, just to give you a shot at winning again here, who knows how many of those you'll get. I can see it happening, but I don't think that's a move that they would make that would really put them in a markedly better spot moving forward.
It's just, it's frustrating right now as a fan, right? We're all fans. We're watching this team, and we're frustrated because we feel like we have the finances to compete. We should be competing every year. We shouldn't be, in one of the worst divisions in baseball, like 8 games behind first place. The prospects we feel like are starting to percolate. We're starting to see some of them come up and pan out. It's awesome to see what Justin Steele is doing. Wisniewski was here at the beginning of the year and he floundered and went back. So, with every great job at the majors, there's another one falling off. We had Mervis up, and I want to touch on him right now. We had him up, and he was not great, and so we put him down. And we brought up what's the kid's name? Is it Jordan Young?
Jared
Young is now at first base, and now he's struggling. So it seems like, all right, maybe we put him back down and give Mervis another shot. We know he just wrote an article for Cubs Insider on Mervis. If you could break it down to us and for the listeners, like, what do you see in him? Do you see a redemption coming? Did he do any correction down in the minors? And what are you hearing? Is he going to come up here anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really hopeful that he'll come back, and part of this is bias because like some of these guys I get to know a little bit better than others just through the course of whatever, and I've gotten to know Matt a little bit, and we kind of have a joint venture with Obvious Shirts, so it's in my best financial interest for him to come up and we can sell some T-shirts, but no, if you look at. And he's one where certainly there's a point at which the numbers in the box score are what you have to go off of, right? If you're not producing at the plate, it doesn't matter what the underlying data says over a certain period of time, right? He's only got 99 plate appearances, though. And I think that's one of the things that we look at. But in that time, I mean, he led the Cubs in terms of hard hit percentage, and some of those other statistics. If you look at some of the things he was doing, it seemed like he was really being stung badly by bad luck, right? That's a lot. When you hit the ball hard, it should turn into hits for you more frequently. In his case, it wasn't a lot of that because he wasn't elevating very well. Some of his swing decisions weren't great. I think a lot of it was mental in that he was kind of being overly patient at times. That would stick him in bad positions where now he's in a 2-strike count. He's forced to expand the zone, and hitters or pitchers were taking advantage of it. So I know he's made some corrections. He is hitting really well again at AAA. This is a guy who we have to remember it's really only it's his 3rd season. He didn't even have a full first season after he was drafted in 2020, 21, had kind of a rough season. So last year was really only his first full solid season in the pros, even though he's 25. So, and he didn't have a ton of experience at Duke. So I do feel like this is a guy who could come up. He just needs to catch a couple of breaks. And I also think, and we can see this if they sell off, there's a point at which you've got to throw the guy out there every day, regardless of matchups,
see what
whatever.
You got.
Yeah, like sink or swim. And if it doesn't work, great. We'll move on and check on somebody else. But playing him every other day and trying to only get the nice matchups or whatever, that's great when you think you might be competitive. But based on where they are now, I think he's got a shot to hopefully come up, and it would answer a ton of questions if he could really be the man at first.
All right. So how many of these, I guess the big question is how many of these starters that we have that are in the starting lineup, even tonight, how many of them are still on the roster in 3 years? When we're hopefully, contending year after year. I mean, who's still here? Obviously, it's a big name that he should still be here, right? I would love to see Justin Steele at the top of the rotation. Miguel Amaya has been playing really well. Do you think he's the future at catcher? I mean, how many of these guys do you think are still going to be on this roster in a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at it just based on, right, Suzuki's got 3 more years with a no trade. So unless he waives that, he's around. Haps probably around. Amaya for sure. And I've been impressed by how quickly we talk about guys who haven't had a bunch of experience. I mean, he's battled just a ton of injuries. So to be a catcher, right? Like that usually takes much longer to continue to develop, but he's always done a really good job.
I know. I think a lot of people had written him off too because he
Yeah,
was a name that everyone was talking about for years and years, and he never came up. And everyone's just he's gone. Similar to maybe Brennan Davis now.
Right.
People
Right.
are just like, yeah, forget him. You
yeah.
know.
And there's a point.
So
I think there's something almost good about it. Speaking of which, like think about Braylon Marquez, who is only just got he's assigned to the Iowa Cubs, just got called up to Double A for a rehab assignment, so he'd been pitching lower. So these are guys that fell completely off the radar. I think that's almost better for some players because we do as fans kind of we all climb aboard the hype train, and I think sometimes these guys are so young, right, that their engine is not equipped to pull that much weight, and they're getting into pro ball. And a lot of them, you look at Brennan Davis, right? He was you guys can relate to this at least separately, right? He was a two-sport athlete in high school, never really committed to college, or he was going to play in college, never went because he got drafted. As a professional was the first time he was actually a full-time baseball player.
Yeah.
And I think the grind of that, going from a high school season to a professional season, some guys maybe react to that. Maybe they work out a little too hard, too much, too fast, right? I'd love to see him just get healthy. But yeah, maybe he'll end up being up here. But outside of a few of those guys, man, it's tough. You look at Christopher Morel,
Yeah.
hopefully, but is he in? Where does he have a spot? He's if Horner and Swanson are both healthy, he's sure not playing the middle infield.
You would take Horner over Morel? You would take Horner over Morel?
Yeah, that's second anyway. I think for me, Morel is like a more dynamic Ben Zobrist. I want him all over the field. I want him as a guy who can play every day, but I don't want him in any one spot every day. Even though the Cubs have kind of said they'd kind of like to do that, but I have yet to see him like play consistently good defense anywhere where I could be like, yeah, dude, I like that. Like the arm is phenomenal, but you don't know where it's going
cutoff
sometimes.
Throw the other day, yeah, for a tag at second.
Yeah, it's just like, wait, man, hey, you're at second base now. Like you do not have to throw it 100 miles an hour over to first. Just get it there. It's cool. But I think he also, and this I'd like to say would come with maturity, but there are times where it's like, dude, you got to understand, even a third, where it's like, all right, man, how about maybe don't shuffle 3 steps and pump twice and then force yourself into the hardest throw ever. Like, just set your feet and make a throw, make the easy play. That's it. That's all I'm asking. But, you talk about forgotten guys. I think about that. Like David Bodie is still down in AAA. He's still in the organization. Like they're looking for a third baseman. What can he do? But, yeah, I don't know. It's really tough to look at this roster right now and be like, yeah, 3 years from now, man, I can see. I mean, 4 of them. Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the next question of, I think every fan, maybe of every team in the MLB is like, are we going to get Shohei Ohtani? And do the Cubs even have a chance if we're asking the question about how many of these guys are building blocks for the future and we're naming 2, maybe 3 guys. Like, why would he pick here?
I can't imagine why he would, honestly, at this point. I mean,
yeah.
What he said the other day, losing sucks. Like and that's in no uncertain terms, right? If you're trading everyone away or just multiple guys and you're flailing to another 70-win season, what is there about that team? This is a dude who's played alongside Mike Trout for his entire career and still hasn't been able to get to the postseason and win any games. So what about the Cubs is going to give you any confidence that they're going to do a better job than what the Angels, who have spent, by the way, tons of money. You talk about a team that has spent just an absurd amount of money on players who are way past their prime that ended up doing nothing.
Anthony Rendon.
Josh Hamilton, Albert Pujols, Anthony Rendon, like the list goes on.
Yeah.
If I'm him, I mean, I'm looking at the Dodgers. I'm looking at the Giants, right? Because if I can stay in California, it's closer to Japan, clearly, right? There's so much there that he's already familiar with. To me, the Cubs would have to make the most overwhelmingly amazing pitch to him and basically go out there and guarantee that they're going to be adding the right kind of talent around him and effectively giving him kind of carte blanche, like, all right, who do you want to play with you? Who are you teammates?
Yeah.
They can't just go sign. I don't care what they pay him. You pay him $500 million, but you still got to spend a whole lot more to bring in several other players. I just don't see that they're equipped right now.
Yeah.
To do that. and I hate that because I'd love to see that. I mean,
It'd be
I know.
amazing. It'd be must-watch TV
Oh.
every time he's on the field. You know, he's the best baseball player ever.
Yeah, and I talked about selling subscriptions to Marquee, and you want to get butts in the seats. I mean, that's if they found a way to do that, like that dude would make Tom Ricketts far more money than his contract, in my opinion, just based on the think about the Asian market.
International, market. Yeah.
It would be incredible. I mean, the guy is a superstar, but again, he does not want to be the lone superstar or the only guy carrying the team. So I hate it because I mean he's just so fun to watch, and I would love to see him at Wrigley, but I will.
Man. All right. Finishing up here, we'll do probably 2 more questions. It seems all doom and gloom right now on the north side. Is there any glimmer of hope? I'm usually the eternal optimist. Like, this team goes on a 5-game winning streak, right? Somebody steps up, Dansby gets healthy, and he comes back, and he's that leader that we need, because this team desperately, I think, in my opinion, needs a leader. Is there any optimism on your end for this Cubs team this year?
Whatever is there is fading really, really quickly. I had a lot of it right going into the second half, then it faded, then it kind of bounced back with the Saturday win over Boston, right? And then as we talked about earlier, then you get a Sunday loss and you lose to the Nats, and it just keeps feeling like, again, it's like the video of people slipping and falling on ice. Like, I keep seeing that, right? Just when you think they've gotten themselves back up, maybe they've gotten their balance. No, they just fall right over on their ass again.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's kind of funny at first, and then it just becomes painful. You're like, so yeah, I think it's gone. And then I've gotten to a point, if they end up losing here on Tuesday, and especially if they go on to drop another one to the Nats, I think I'll have just resigned myself to it. And then it's just a matter of like, okay, let's get on with the trade deadline so we can just sort of see where this is at. We can reassess, because right now it just stinks to be in this weird limbo and just have to like creep toward August 1st. Yeah, going like,
we selling or competing? What are we doing?
Yeah, let's figure it out. Let's move forward, and then you damn well better go spend this off season because they need to.
Yeah. And as we're talking right now, they're still down 3-2 in the bottom of the 6th. So, all right, last question, because you got the Wu-Tang hat on, and I read that you can name all 10 members of the Wu-Tang Clan in under 4 seconds. So I'm gonna start a timer, I think. I don't know how, when the last time is that you practiced this, but
it's been a minute, but
I'm gonna give you an opportunity here, and then I'll start the timer. All right.
Okay. Are you starting when I go, or are you going to count me down?
I'm going to start when you go. I will hit the button when you go.
Okay, here we go. And Rizage's older to best suspected Eckberg on the shift. You got Ghostface Killer, Master Killer, Capadonna.
I'm gonna have to take his word for it. I'm gonna take his word for it.
352 right there. It was under 4 seconds.
Old Dirty Bastard, Inspect the Deck, Raekwon the Chef. You got Ghostface Killer, Method Man, Capadonna, Master Killer. That's 10 of them, and I threw Capadonna in there as the.
You even slowed it down there, and that was still probably like under 5 seconds. So that was
weird.
Awesome.
They're very very odd. There's one of my few talents, right?
That's amazing. I love it. Evan, thanks so much for joining us. Again, you can find him on Twitter at @DEvanAltman. He's the editor-in-chief at Cubs Insider. You can find Cubs Insider on Twitter at @RealCubsInsider. Evan, thanks again.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And always a good reason to drink a beer on a Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks again to our guest, Evan Altman. Again, he is the editor-in-chief at Cubs Insider. You can find him at @DEvanAltman on Twitter. I thought that was great. I mean, it was honestly, I think, very realistic interpretation of where this team's headed.
Which means they suck. Yeah.
I know you have the optimistic view, but I like the realistic view. And I don't see us getting Ohtani. And I think this team's going to sell. I think, in my opinion, they're going to sell Stroman and Bellinger. Bring back up a couple guys. Hopefully, some more established players so that we can expect to be up in the next year or two. And when some of these other kids come up, then we have something there, just like the Reds are doing right now. I mean, the young Reds look really good. They got a lot of really young players coming up right now. So I think that's going to be a team to compete with over the next couple of years. But I do have a fast fact for you today.
What is it?
And it's about Cubs postseason. And the last time they were in the postseason, Dan, do you remember the last time they were in the postseason?
I'm going to guess
including the wild card game in this.
2018.
That's right. It is 2018. It was the wild card game. They lost to the Rockies. Before that, 2017 lost in the LCS to the Dodgers, but and then obviously the World Series 2016. So you're going all the way back to 2018 now. It's
which is
2023.
wild, right?
I
5
can't
years
believe
of
they fell off
uncompetitive
that
baseball.
fast. Right.
It's
They fell off that
a
quickly.
major market team too. Like we should be like, I saw a stat today that this is the worst record the Yankees have had, and they're like what, maybe 9 games under 500 or something. But it's the worst record they've had, 9 games under 500 since 1990. That's
Wow.
33 years.
Yeah, the Cubs should be right with them too.
They should be in that echelon. Like, pull out the checks, Tommy. Start signing some players. Like, flip it at the break if it's not working. But like, this kicking it down the road and just signing teenagers, like we're talking about with Evan, like that gets old real fast because they don't always pan out. You're trying to save some bucks by signing them when they're young and cheap. Sometimes if you want to pay, look at the Dodgers. They're always in there, right? The teams that spend, owners that want to win spend money. Owners that want to make money don't. Which one do we have, right?
It's well said. That's our show today. Thanks again to our guest, Evan Altman, for joining us. For Dan Slowick, I'm Evan Bierman. You've been listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com. And you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft. Thank you again for listening. Cheers.